Hello, this is Linda Hodgdon from usevisualstrategies.com. I am here today with a gentleman named Jude Morrow. He is from Derry, Ireland, and I hope you love his accent like I do. He has just written a book that we're going to be talking about, and I would like you to meet him now. Hello there, Jude.
Oh, hello, Linda. Hello, everybody else. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me. I'm really glad to be here, and thanks for the compliments on the accent as well.
I love it. Anyway, your book title sounds kind of sad. Can you show everybody your book?
Here it is. This is my book, and it's titled "Why Does Daddy Always Look So Sad?" And despite the melancholy suggested in the title, it's a really quite an uplifting book. And would you like me to tell the outline of it?
Well, first of all, I'd like you to tell me about the title.
Well, about the title, well, my book is different. My book has a different angle wherein I am autistic and my son Ethan is not. So I came through the mainstream school system. I had a lot of communication difficulties early in life. I found it very hard to socialize. I always knew I was different and it wasn't easy. I was always the different kid. I was just the child that stood alone and watched everybody else mingle and socialize. But over time, I did progress. I didn't go to any autism support groups or anything. They didn't really exist whenever I was growing up in Ireland in the 1990s and early 2000s. And over time, I went to university and became a social worker because, yes, of course, the kid with the most social difficulties at school decided to become a social worker. And it's a job I still do now, other than writing. And I had a son on the 23rd of July 2013. And feelings that existed then are very present now, given that there's been a huge life change for everyone with COVID-19. But whenever fatherhood was coming for me, it was a huge life change. And as Ethan went through the normal stages of his own child development, it was just one change after another. And I struggled to cope with it, so much so that one day while I was at work, Ethan asked my mother, "Why does Daddy always look so sad?" Because I was so upset and felt so inadequate that I couldn't manage change very well. I denied that I was autistic for so long, and at that time even believed that it was just an affliction for children, and it was something that I had grown out of. It's something that I denied and masked my whole life, and it just came so much to the surface again whenever Ethan was born, to the point where he asked that question.
Wow.
That one there. So
Okay.
the so that's where the title of the book came from.
Okay. And now let me think. Let me do my math. Ethan is what, 6 or 7 years old?
He is 6, he's 7 on the 23rd of July.
Okay. Is Daddy still sad?
Daddy is not still sad. Now, what he has learned is that Daddy looks sad, but Daddy isn't always sad internally because my you've got a book deal face and my you've got a couple of weeks to live face are more or less the same, as is the tone of voice. So he knows that I'm not quite like him, but on the whole of it, I'm not sad at all because I denied and hated myself for being autistic for so long, but now I am so open, I'm proud of it, and I'm very happy with myself. I wouldn't change myself for the world. And I have an inner peace now that I certainly didn't have in Ethan's early years.
That's a really great accomplishment, a personal accomplishment to get to that point. Um, what got you to that point, though?
Well, when I was young, I was so different, but I only focused on the negatives, that I spent more time alone, that I couldn't communicate very effectively, and a lot of the negativities that my childhood involved masked the accomplishments that I had because I got good grades. I was accepted into university to study social work. I graduated with that, and my life on the whole of it is not overly remarkable, but I did have a lot of achievements one after the other, and my kind of self hatred stopped me from realizing those things. And it was my drive and passion that kept me going forward. And I would love to say it was just a solo venture. It really wasn't. I have the most loving and caring parents in the whole world. And I think I was caught up in the societal preconception of what autism and what being autistic means. Because whenever you Google autism, or even look at any charitable website or anything, it discusses in so much detail about how it's a developmental disorder and that it causes so many difficulties and stress and financial burden and so on. And it made me feel a little bit guilty because whenever you look for information these days, being a millennial like I am, you go to Google. You don't go to other voices. You don't go to other well respected literature. You go to Google. And I suppose I bought into the societal misconceptions of autism, believed those of myself, but whenever I adapted a more positive self image, I realized that my autistic quirks and passions are what got me to where I am now, right up until this moment where I'm even talking to you.
Okay. And so you are expressing very well that the media tends to represent autism as something that's a problem, something that's a disability, something that uh, represents a lot of uh, challenges for people. And yet, as an individual on the spectrum, you have managed over time to overcome those challenges and lead a very fulfilling life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to show that autistic people can have happy and successful lives. We can do it. And whenever have done speaking tours and I've done speaking events all over this country, had one for the States, although given what's going on at the moment, that had to be postponed. But whenever I speak to parents, seems to be a collective feeling of darkness when the word autism is mentioned in relation to their
Mhm.
child. And that's why I speak to so many large audiences, is to show that look at me. There's nobody that hated being autistic as much as I did. There's nobody that hated being different because yes, I am autistic, but I was still a testosterone filled teenage boy once that just couldn't really fit in very well. And there was so many misconceptions. There's so many articles and negative press about the autistic spectrum. And one in particular that I find really, really challenging is that in some European countries, and maybe more so in the United States, is that the word autism is used primarily to describe a child or person that would display the features of a classic learning disability as it's known. But it's not necessarily that. Now, I know that from my own social worker background, that there are a lot of individuals with learning disabilities who also have autism. That is very true, but whenever people think of that image, there doesn't really seem to be much separation there, and it really is quite sad to me. I'll be honest.
Mhm. And there is a certain percentage of individuals on the autism spectrum that do have either significant learning disabilities or intellectual disabilities, but that still doesn't mean that they can't learn and have very fulfilling lives.
Oh, absolutely. For a short time, I was working in a home for learning disabled adults. It was a residential care home. I worked there, and they had such a good quality of life, and it really, really filled me with joy. It did, because they would have had daycare placements, and they could build happy relationships among one another and other people. And I know that the societal conception is that it's something to stay away from. But it really, people being integrated into society and feeling like human beings, so to speak, and having the opportunities to have wonderful life experiences is something that is very, very positive.
That's great to hear. I want to make sure that you understand that many of the people, or most of the people listening to this interview are either parents of children who are on the autism spectrum or they're teachers who work with children on the autism spectrum. And I think that you're sharing an important message for each of those groups of people. Now, you write in the beginning of the book about some of your early childhood, and you were not a perfect angel as a young child.
I wasn't, and although I will immediately apply a forehand and say, find me a perfect angel of any child.
Right.
And don't say your own or ones that you know, but um, it was a difficult time because for my mother, because for as long as I could remember, I knew I even wasn't like my sister at home. From when I was 3, yes, I've always been autistic from the day I've been born, but I've always been aware too. I've been aware that I wasn't quite like my sister or my mother and father. I just knew it. I just wasn't quite like them, and it wasn't easy. I would have lined my toy cars up on the windowsill of my parents' house, and I would have woken up very early in the morning, very regimented, around 4 a.m. every morning, and had a long waking day until maybe around 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. at night until I went to bed again. So my routine, yes, and um, my quirks were quite challenging for my mother, but she is the epitome of grace, patience, and love, and she still is.
Well, you taught each other, I'm sure.
Yeah, we did because before me, like my mother would never have really known about autism or what being autistic actually was. I
Hmm.
mean, we're talking the early 1990s, and I mean, autism as a term or as awareness, so to speak, it really wasn't there back then. It
No.
was difficult for her, and she did live quite a lonely existence in
Hmm.
that time because she didn't know any other parents who were going through the same thing, and she didn't really know of any groups or anything, nor did she even know what autism was to highlight the main point. So it really wasn't easy for her, and I suppose now looking back on it, I can reflect on my childhood and I remember it so vividly. And at that stage, my mother would admit herself that she couldn't really see light at the end of the tunnel.
Hmm.
And I want to be an example of going from my life in chapter 1 of why does daddy always look so sad until now, because a lot of people have said, and I mean, if you don't mind, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is it's hard to visualize whenever I'm speaking with you now, when you read about the child in chapter 1
Hmm.
versus who I am as a 6'4" man with a beard, it's hard to, you know, but I can assure everybody it is me and I have witnesses, my family.
Well, there's a lot that has changed and grown and matured over the years, and that's really a very important story.